Hello, Hasselblad 2000 FC camera. Introduced in 1977, this should have been, and could have been, Hasselblad's finest and most popular film camera. But it never was. It never really established itself in the same way as the mechanical 500 series cameras that were introduced almost 20 years before. So what went wrong? In many respects, this is a better camera. This camera has a focal plane shutter, which gives it a wider shutter speed range, so from 1 second up to a 2,000th of a second. The 500 series mechanical cameras with their leaf shutters only go up to a 500th of a second. So it's got a more versatile shutter. It also has an instant return mirror, which is fantastic. The 500 series Hasselblads don't have that. Its one disadvantage is that you can't sync with flash at all speeds, because you can't do that with a focal plane shutter, or you couldn't, of course, in the 1970s. But again, with this camera, if you want to put the Hasselblad C lenses, so they're the lenses with inbuilt leaf shutters used on the mechanical cameras, onto this camera, you can. So you can sync with all speeds if you want to. So in many respects, this is a superior camera. But unfortunately, there was a problem. And that problem was this: the shutter. This is a very thin foil focal plane shutter. And when the camera was first introduced, it soon became apparent that fast-moving, perhaps slightly clumsy photographers were putting their fingers through the shutter. We're putting the corner of the film back through the shutter, very easily done when you're mounting it to a camera. And if you look very carefully, I don't know if you can see that, there is actually a little crease on the shutter of this one. And that little crease is caused because somebody has not paid attention and just knocked the shutter with the corner of the film. It's very thin, it's very vulnerable, it's very easy to damage, and it was very expensive to get fixed. Now, I think it was 4 years later, maybe 5 years later, Hasselblad introduced the FCM camera. And with the FCM camera and all the later cameras, when you do this, the shutter automatically locks out of the way, so you can no longer damage it. But at that point, a reputation had been established, and that reputation was that this was an unreliable camera. Couple that with the fact that with the electronics, it probably wasn't as reliable anyway as the mechanical Hasselblads, and it got itself a name. So sadly, this range of cameras never really took off, which is tragic, because the later cameras, the 200 series cameras, with the cloth focal plane shutters, are very reliable. Okay, so my name is Jonathan Harris from Worldwide Camera Exchange. What I'm going to do now is just run through the features of this camera and just explain what it does and how you use it. Introduced in 77, as I said, the 2000 FC was replaced by the FCM. Subsequently, they led to the 200 series cameras, which have the cloth shutters and much more advanced metering. Let's start with the lenses. You'll usually find F lenses fitted to the 2000 series cameras. The F lenses are the focal plane lenses, so don't have an inbuilt shutter. You've got a focusing ring, you've got an aperture ring, you don't have a shutter dial. If you want to put a C lens, that's the lens with the inbuilt shutter, onto the F series cameras, you can. You can lock the shutter out of the way in the camera, just turn there to the C position, and you can now put you can now put the leaf shuttered lenses onto the camera. The one reason to do that is if you're using a lot of flash, you can then sync with flash at all speeds, whereas you do have some limitations with flash sync on the focal plane shutter. But if you're buying this camera, most people will stick to the F series lenses. One advantage with the F series lenses is they tend to be faster. If you look at the 50mm, the 50mm F is a 2.8 lens. The 50mm C for the 500 series cameras is an f4 lens. Look at the 150, this is a 150 here. This is the 150 F, and it's a 2.8 lens. The equivalent for the 500 series cameras is an f4. And then there's also, of course, the legendary 110mm f2 lens for the F series cameras, which is an absolutely fantastic portrait and extremely fast lens. When you're taking the lens on and off the camera does have to be cocked, just as with all of these Hasselblads. So to take the lens off, wind it on, and when you put the lens back on, always make sure that the lens is cocked. So there's the little slot you can see there. That's the cocking mechanism. Make sure the slot is aligned with there's a little red dot. If it isn't, I'll manually trip this. Now, do you see that now? That slot is no longer horizontal. That will now not go on the camera. So if the lens gets into that position, you can put it in a bag and just jolt it. And you can sometimes do that. If the cocking mechanism is in that position, it won't mount. So what you need to do is to re-cock it. And to do that, you put a screwdriver into that little slot and just turn it around in the direction of the arrow until it aligns as it should. Now I've got a little tool here which is brilliant. If you own Hasselblad, get one of these because these are absolute lifesavers. This has a little screwdriver head in there which you can just couple with that little with the shutter cocking mechanism, and then just re-cock it like that. You can also use these to unjam the camera if you jam a 500 series camera. So cock the lens, back on the camera, and away you go, no issues. Looking at the camera, battery goes in there, PX28, lock, unlock, straightforward obviously. Flash socket goes in there. Looking on this side, wind on crank, that's the mirror lock up there. Very useful if you're using it on a tripod. It is quite a bang when the mirror goes up, so always use that if you can. Moving on to the front of the camera, shutter release, lens release. On the bottom, you've got the standard Hasselblad tripod plate, which works with all the Hasselblad mounting accessories, and also a 1/4 and a 3/8 inch tripod bush. Looking at the back release on the top, same as all the Hasselblad. Slide that like that, comes straight off. As I said in the intro, be very, very careful with the shutter. It is so easy to damage that, so really only take the back off when you absolutely have to. I'll post a link showing how to load these. Fairly straightforward, but it does need a bit of practice. When you put it back on, hinge it on gently, again to avoid the shutter, and then just put it back on like that. Viewfinders, standard Hasselblad viewfinders for this camera. As I said, the later 200 series cameras with the focal plane shutter do have more advanced metering, but this is the standard waist level finder. You can put 90-degree prisms on there, 45-degree prisms on there. You can get various chimneys to put your eye down like that with built-in magnifiers. The screen just held in with those two little clips there. To take the screen out, you just push those clips to one side there and there, and you just drop the screen into the palm of your hand. To put it back in, drop the screen back into position, and when you push the viewfinder back into position, you'll see those two little clips very cleverly just come across, just to secure the screen in the right position. So really that's about it. The two little studs there and there, I should say, just for the strap. Hasselblad make a very nice little metal clipped strap which just clips onto there. And fundamentally, very, very simple cameras. Always familiarise yourself with them before going out and taking important shots though, because it is very easy to forget what you're doing with an unfamiliar camera. I will post some other videos on how to test these cameras. If you are buying them, do look over them very, very carefully. Do check the optics very carefully. Obviously check the shutter to make sure there's no damage to the shutter, and you should run some tests to make sure the shutter is working at all speeds. But I will post a link to a video which will explain more about that. Okay, so I hope that's useful. One final thing to say. This is something that you really do need to know about, not just with these cameras, but with all electronic cameras of this age. If these develop a fault, and it's an electronic fault, the spares aren't available, so effectively the camera becomes a write-off. I mean, a camera like this might well cost you anything between £600–700 and £1,000. If the camera develops a fault, then effectively you've got to throw it away. That isn't the case with the mechanical stuff. With the mechanical stuff, you can get it fixed. And actually, don't forget, with this setup I've got here, if anything's going to fail, it's going to be the body. It's not going to be the lens, it's not going to be the back, it's not going to be the viewfinder. And if it is any of those things, they can be quite easily fixed. It is just the body. So if the worst were to happen, you would only need to replace the body Although that said, they're getting a little bit hard to find in decent condition. So do bear that in mind. That isn't a Hasselblad. That isn't a warning about early Hasselblad. The same applies with Mamiya, with Bronica, with Nikon, with Canon. Any equipment, any early electronic equipment of this era, the spares are no longer available. So if they go wrong, you've got to effectively accept it's going to be a write-off. Okay, if you have any comments, please stick them in the box below. Otherwise, please subscribe and like, and I hope to see you again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.